Cool.
So I guess from here we'll start kind of talking about what does it look like for us that have been shut down and stuff like that. You know, as far as I know, some people have questioned about the ASE, the student certification tests and stuff like that. Some people didn't get a chance to do them before left school. You know, and some of us are on dual credit where you need those tests for the kids to get the dual credit. You know, is there a possibility of that? I'll let you guys kind of go from there, I guess. And if people got questions, just chime in and we'll go from there.
So we'll start with some updates. Before the coronavirus, we had a revisions meeting for the collision refinish. We had a 3-day revision. All of that's being finalized. Automotive is up for revision tentatively in October. There's been test writing sessions for ATIS. So there will be an ASE certification for ATIS. On the foundation side, we've added some additional field managers this year. Clearly, Donna has been added to the mix. John oversees that group. So since the coronavirus, if you go to the ASE Education Foundation website, there is a link right there in the middle, coronavirus update. And in there, there's a lot of resources and information. First, clearly everybody is out of school and we're not holding anybody responsible for certain criteria of the accreditation process, the hands-on, all of those pieces, spring advisory committee meeting if you didn't have it. All of those things we understand for the spring of 2020 are going to be a void in most folks' accreditation process. As of March 1st, if you were anywhere in the accreditation process, you were approved for site visit, you were due for a 2.5-year compliance review, you were due for a reaccreditation, we're extending everybody out 6 months from there. That is also on the website there. There's a complete list of all of our foundation partners that are also offering their curriculum up at no cost for both instructors and students. They range anywhere from collision, refinish, to automotive, to the medium heavy duty truck guys. There's some really nice stuff out there. As for the ASE students certifications, the entry-level certification, there should have been an email sent out last week that you should have received that basically says that the student certifications are being extended out till September 30th. ASE is working on a potential remote proctor, but don't know if that component will be in place or be able to be in place in time, but they are extending them out through September 30th. Now, even though all of you are out of school, believe it or not, we have some of our community colleges here in Texas that have gone to a super modified schedule where the college is allowing the students to come in small groups and do their hands-on for a certain period of time, and then they all stay separated. They all have masks and stuff, and all of them have face masks also. And then when they're done, they leave, and then a while later, another group comes in, and some of them are proctoring their tests in that format. Even though school's not coming back here either in Texas, some of the schools are going to allow students to show up in very small groups, pre-assigned, separated, and have the student test proctored. I know that in many states that is not an option. So for right now, what we've done is we've extended it through September 30th. If you did not receive that email, either Robin or Donna can get that to you, or John or myself. Sometimes those things show up in the spam file. Also, yes.
My boss wanted me to ask this question.
No.
One of the colleges around here is doing like it's the Accuplacer test, and they're doing that by Zoom. I told him that you guys were looking at something kind of like an offsite proctor. Is that what you're thinking of?
I really don't know. Here's a few things that are important to know is when you start to do that, you could compromise the questions. And if that's the case, those of you that know what it costs to create an ASE question know that it's a very expensive proposition. I don't know what it is that they're looking at, to be honest with you. That's the IT guys and guys in a different world than where Donna, Robin, John, and I live. But I know that there is extensive conversations and things being researched to make sure it is customer friendly if it becomes available, but more importantly, secure enough to secure our intellectual property. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's the answer I needed to give back to him.
Yep.
I just needed you to say it, if you understand what I'm saying, because he doesn't.
Yep.
A lot of folks don't understand the complexity of the test.
No, and if I'm not mistaken, and John Sam may be able to correct me, the last time somebody told me what it costs to create a single ASE question, I think it's like $3,000.
Wow.
So when you figure you got all these questions, and if these things are compromised, whether it's at a lesser difficulty level than the professional, you still have all of the research, all of the revisions committees, all of the test writing committees, all of the research, all of the beta testing before this question can go live. So we have to be very careful about that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
think the biggest, for my underclassmen, it's totally doable, and I think for every one of us here, the biggest part of it's for our seniors, just because this is part of the college accreditation that we've done.
Yes, and we know a lot of schools and a lot of states. It's part of the makeup of the program, and that's why even though people aren't in the office, people are working very hard behind the scenes. And as most of you said, I'm used to traveling a lot, annually, and I haven't been on a plane since March 13th. And I can tell you, I've never worked harder in my life. You know what I mean? And the only people that work harder than me are the people at Lowe's and Home Depot, because I'm telling you what, those places are packed. So one of the things that we made us, we're planning to, but you got to go to the garden center first, remember?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we are creating right now is a library of resources for the accreditation process. And I'm doing webinars, small webinars, standards 1 through 4, 5 and 6, 7 by itself, 8, 9, and 10 as a group, 11 and 12. Another one on just the self-evaluation and the application, redoing the one on advisory committees. And I'm doing these webinars with the field managers to get input from them, and then they'll be re-recorded. And then when we're finally happy with the final product, these will be a library of resources for everybody and anybody who is trying to seek the accreditation process or trying to convince your administration that this is not your responsibility by yourself. How's that? So, yes. So I've been working on that. I've been getting great feedback from the field managers. I do one on every Monday and Friday, but it is just for the field managers to get feedback. And all we're doing is going down each one of the standards and the rating components and providing you simple information or examples of how to complete that rating component, but more importantly, to show you how it brings value to your program. And in some instances where people think there are standards that are redundant, we explain why it's more of a checks and balance than a redundancy. and that helps with clarification. Also, emphasizing throughout the process that the administration needs to be involved in all levels, and they have a major role and responsibility in this accreditation, just like any other accreditation at your school district or your college campus. This is not an individual's responsibility. And also talk about the value of industry's involvement in decision-making in these programs. So that's kind of what we're up to right now. Yeah.
It, for me, and it would be wonderful to get somebody to step in and help. And I do not want this to sound as egotistical as it's going to sound, but man, I ought to just do it myself, because there's one person in my school district who understands the automotive industry, and you're looking at him.
Well, but here's the thing is, you can take that two ways, and I talk about that a lot, that if you're the only person in your school district that knows what you do, that's also a problem. We have to educate your administration at every level of the value that your program provides, not only to the students and the community, but more importantly to business and industry, who those people are both personal and professional taxpayers in your community. And those people need to know that there is a pool of qualified entry-level technicians in their community that they can draw from. But more importantly, if you're not getting the resources that you need for your program through industry involvement and some of the components of the accreditation process, those things bubble up. And also you can validate why you need these things for your program, and industry could be there to put the stamp of approval on it and help you get where you need to be. Does all of that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think I went down the wrong hole there.
That's all right.
My district appreciates the program. My advisory board, my partners in industry, they all get it. I'm talking about, when we're talking about the reaccreditation, the 2.5 year, filling in the blanks, doing the paperwork.
Right.
I'm just a lot more comfortable with me doing that, because I know who's going to be reading it, and they're going to be reading it with my eyes and not an administrator's eyes.
Well, and I understand that completely. Where I really think that they need to be involved, and for some reason, it maybe not you, but other people are afraid to invite the administration to the advisory committee. And I've always said, invite the highest level in your school or college. If they show up, great. If they don't, so be it. But the thing is you're providing them an opportunity to meet with business and industry and hear what business and industry have to say. And a lot of times when I know that high level people are going to be in a meeting, I may modify an agenda to make sure a conversation comes up that they need to know about, that they are not getting the right information. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And sometimes industry is saying, why is this not happening? Why do we not have this resource? Why are these students not able to grasp these concepts? Because maybe you don't have the tools and equipment that you need. Maybe you've had facility issues that you've sent maintenance and requests in since Moby Dick was a guppy. But if you do a facility evaluation and notate that in the meeting minutes, and there is an administrator or administrators in the room, the committee chair, which should be an industry person, could look to somebody and say, who's going to take care of that? Once somebody agrees to take care of that and it's in the meeting minutes, all liability is removed from you, the instructor, and now put on them. And if it's in the meeting minutes, you have a legal document to support if anything happens that nobody took care of this. Does that make sense? Yep. And that's why I've always stressed that the meeting minutes should be quality enough and detailed enough that if I'm not at your meeting, but I read the minutes, I know exactly what happened. If I read the minutes and I can't understand one thing that went on in that meeting and that there were no recommendations or conversations, then technically in ASE's eyes, it didn't happen. And that's where schools are really struggling sometimes. And what I tell people is there should be somebody that's taking the meeting minutes that has nothing to do with the meeting. Their job is just to take the minutes and make sure that you notate who's making the statement or the recommendation and what they are saying. Because some of you have some of the most powerful business partners in your community. And when they make a statement or a recommendation for your program in the meeting minutes, and they get sent on to the powers to be, the powers to be are really going to notice that that was made by Mr. Smith, and he's the second biggest employer in our community. But if somebody just sees that somebody made a recommendation and there's no reference to who, it's okay, somebody made a recommendation. Those are the things that we try to work with and instill into the programs in the accreditation process to help with program improvement and to strengthen your program so that you have the resources you need so that your students are successful, your employers are successful, and your role and responsibility and the things that you do day to day are a little bit more streamlined and eased. Does that make sense?
You bet.
Hey, George, just for a second, I'm going to talk as an instructor here, but during the years I was if I could get a school board member on to my advisory committee or on my advisory committee, you know, most of the time my administration, all they knew was how many students I had enrolled, how many students we placed, and whether or not the place looked clean and organized. Beyond that, they really didn't know much about what we were doing. So when it come time for the big budget items, they were like, yeah, you have good enrollment, you had good placement, you don't really need this equipment. So if I could get somebody on that was either on the board or really good friends with the board, it really helped to so when it came up before the board, you had somebody there to testify and say, hey, this is why they need that.
Robert, you make a good point. And if you can't have that person, one of the things that I recommend is if you're doing your capital outlay, discuss it with the advisory committee. And if the committee agrees that you need that piece of equipment or that support material or whatever, ask each of the committee members to make that recommendation in writing on their company letterhead. And when you submit your capital outlay, submit it with all those letters. That carries the weight that you need sometimes that we don't think about. Also, to Robin's point, the third largest school district in Texas is Cypress Fairbanks. 12 high schools with 12 automotive programs. Yes, they're that crazy. But no less than 3 times have we had the superintendent in attendance. And one time I knew he was coming, and the director of the transportation department for that school district, first of all, they have 5 maintenance facilities and roll 1,100 buses a day. The director would not hire student interns. And the gentleman who was the foreman was a former automotive instructor and was bringing the superintendent to the meeting. So I modified the agenda to discuss internships. And I had a very prominent employer in our community when that subject matter came up. And he stated in the meeting publicly, he said, help me understand why you want us to hire your students and you won't. And just by that statement, that superintendent leaned over to my buddy and quietly said, what's that man talking about? And my buddy was able to say, well, our director won't hire our own kids. 2 weeks later, that problem was fixed. And once again, it's getting the people in the room. And sometimes your industry partners who are very influential in your either school board or school district, sometimes the invitation for them to come to your meeting needs to come from them. It's very powerful sometimes when an industry partner says to an assistant superintendent or somebody, hey, I'm coming to this meeting. Are you going to be there? It's amazing who shows up. So how can we help you with accreditation, advisory committee members, things that that you may be struggling with individually or collectively. That's what we're here to help with tonight, and that's what we have field managers across the country for.
So, Robin, will you be on my advisory board now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got several Kansas City area that I'm on now. So yeah, absolutely.
Excellent, excellent. That right there in itself, having an ASE presence in Kansas, on the board, I think that will be huge.
Yep.
George, I want to make a comment.
Please, John, go ahead.
It's great to have a guy like Robin on your advisory committee, but there's only about 20 of us field managers, and we can't be on everybody's advisory committee. And the way the rules are written, the advisory committee's role is the organism that makes everything work around accreditation. So it's nice to have Robin in there, and it's nice for him to be a member, but all of these institutions that are accredited have a responsibility to run their advisory committee as it's intended to be run. And it's an extremely powerful voice when it's run correctly. Just because you have an advisory committee meeting doesn't mean necessarily that it was a good meeting, or you have good minutes and you have good documentation of what needs to take place. So God bless Robin for participating and becoming a member of your advisory committee, but we can't have every accredited school with a field manager on the advisory committee.
Agreed. And I want to say something too. John, you just reminded me of something. If all of you are automotive instructors, some of our foundation partners that are specifically on the medium heavy duty side, they want to be involved in your advisory committee. Example, I know Donna's reached out to the folks at UPS. We look at UPS and we see brown trucks that deliver packages, and we think that they're diesel technicians. Over 60% of UPS's fleet is 6-liter gasoline GM engines. How's that? So those folks want to be on your advisory committee. FedEx Freight wants to be on your advisory committee. Pepsi Frito-Lay wants to be on your advisory committee. Volvo Mack dealers, Navistar, Ryder, Travel Centers of America. So one of the things that the field managers can help you do is through John and I at a national level, we have the national contacts, but we can drill down and help the field managers with the local shops and managers that are in your communities to get them on your advisory committee. And how powerful it is if all of a sudden walking into your advisory committee is a UPS or a FedEx Freight or somebody at that level that is there supporting your program and wanting to hire your students. Those are the things that we want to continue to do and help you understand that it's just not a narrow window of who can be on your advisory. The window is pretty wide. It really is. And the president and CEO at both FedEx Freight and UPS on their transportation side, both of those gentlemen came from the trenches. So believe me, they're on your side, they're on our side, and that helps a lot with drilling down to their local people. And many of them now, it's part of their job description to get involved with your programs. The other one too is Isuzu through a lot of their fleet. All the things that you may not see in your community as a potential advisory committee member, we have those resources and they would love to be involved in your programs.
Are you going to build that on the resources page also?
So
the contacts?
So the contacts we have at national level, and we really want you to go through your field manager to get those contacts. And then I will work with the field manager on the truck folks and to get you with the local folks. I think Ryder Truck has 8,000 maintenance facilities. I I think FedEx Freight has 144. UPS has somewhere around 200 or 300. Actually, that's the email just came in was from FedEx Freight. So there's a lot of folks out there that are non-traditional advisory committee members for your automotive program, but they want your students. And also, we have found through surveys that there is a fair percentage of your automotive students that would like to work in the diesel industry, but since it's not offered at your high school, they take the next best thing, and that's your auto tech program. But if a diesel person walks through the door, those kids migrate to them, correct?
Hey, George.
Yes.
I'd like to add, those fleet organizations, like George just described, are huge operations. There's a lot of vehicles in those depots. Same thing with the rental car companies.
Yep.
And they're all looking for technicians, and they're all eligible to become members of your advisory committee. How many people here buy parts? Just checking. Any of you ever heard of Napa? You have a Napa store somewhere in your town, at least one. And among those Napa stores, they also serve all their Napa Auto Care Centers. There's 17,000 Napa Auto Care Centers around the U.S. Napa is a big partner with the ASE Education Foundation. They want to get involved. If you buy parts from a Napa store, you already have a connection, and he can either connect you with the manager of the Napa store, or he can get you hooked up with one of the Napa Auto Care Centers who has an interest in finding technicians and perhaps participating in your advisory committee. If there's 17,000 of them around, it ought to be pretty easy for you to be able to find one and talk to them a little bit about participating in your advisory committee. There's nothing wrong with telling them you need help.
Yep. Great job. Yes, John. And also, the Napa store knows every business in your community, and they could, when they make their deliveries, they could hand out the invites for your advisory committee meeting. How's that? Yep. We're here to help, and we know that you have a difficult job normally, and now in today's environment, it's even more difficult. That's why we're on with you guys tonight, and if we need to be on again, we're here. We know that there's some struggles, there's some misunderstandings sometimes in the accreditation process. We don't want to wait to just get together once a year at a summer conference where some people can't even attend. We want to be a resource to you all the time. So if you kind of let us know what you're needing or what you need help in, we'll provide it either in a format like this or however we have to do it to help you, help your students and the people that hire them. Yep.
Are there going to be any changes with the standards coming up, or are they pretty set with where they're at now?
Boy, you just teed that up perfectly, didn't you? So the standards and the rating components within the standards, and let's clarify. The standards are in the program standards document, and those are the standards are what the accreditation process is based around. What I call the rating components are all the things that you're rated on in your self-evaluation, your 2.5-year compliance review, and your site visit. So some of those items there are being moved. Some of them are being removed. There's some that are being added, and there's some changes going on as we speak. They have not been finalized or board approved, but once they are and they become public knowledge, all of the library of resources to support those new will come out at the same time that they come out, so that there's no guesswork involved. Everything will hit publicly at the same time, so you're not trying to figure out, what did we do here? What did we do there? What do we mean here? The library of resources will be already posted and ready to go once they hit. And clearly, depending upon when that time is, there is going to be that transition time in between where people that are currently working on accreditation will stay within the current guidelines, and then there'll be a certain point in time where the revised ones will be instituted permanently, if that makes sense.
And
But
the old ones turned
we're
off.
right. Yeah, we're not going to put anything out on the new standards unless we have a library of resources for you, your administration, and your advisory committee to understand all the decisions that were made and how they were made and why we're asking for you to do the things that are being asked to do in the accreditation process. Does that make sense?
So it sounds like you guys were really getting moving on this right when the COVID thing hit, with doing your updates. Is that also on a 30-day push like the other things are, or are you guys still working on building that stuff right now?
Building it right now because, like I said, I did a webinar for the field managers on Monday for standards 5 and 6. I do one for them on Friday on standard 7, which clearly that one has its own webinar. Tuesday of next week, I'll do 8, 9, and 10, which are fairly easy. I'll do one on standards 11 and 12. I'll do a webinar on both the self-evaluation and then the application. And then, and in there, discuss a lot of pieces. And then we're looking at some other webinars to help. We're going to update the advisory committee webinar I did a couple of years back because that referred to NATEP, and everything will be referring to ASE Education Foundation. Also, that one on advisory committee will reference a lot of the pieces in the revision so that all of that is clear. So yes, we're working on that. George is working on it every day and every evening. And then John's making it look perfect. How's that?
I'll hold you to it, John.
Yeah, semi-perfect.
How can we help you guys and gals?
Well, does anybody have any questions they would like addressed or answered here?
I gave up my favorite show for you guys.
Well, we greatly appreciate you guys making time today to come and talk with us. It means a lot.
A couple of other things we probably ought to mention, George, and rest of the crew here. Word on the street right now, not formally, but word on the street is the Summer Instructor Conference is at risk. We're going to make a call probably next week as to whether or not the conference is going to go or not go. The reason it's at risk is a lot of folks like yourselves may not be willing to get on an airplane with 300 of your best friends twice.
Yeah.
And join another 300 of your best friends at the conference. And of course, when we invite you to come to the conference, we also invite a bunch of industry partners to come and do presentations. And it's not likely they're going to want to break away from trying to dig out from underneath their program to come and do a presentation for us. So we're worried that the conference might end up being or having 1/3 the attendance with no presenters.
Yeah.
So we think it's at risk, but we're having to arm wrestle with the property and the contracts and all that stuff. So probably the attorneys are going to get involved one way or another, and we'll see what happens there. But I wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention this thing that we like to call the portal. The portal is where you manage your accreditation system, you manage your instructor list, you manage your employer list, and of course, we like to see you manage your student rosters. And here's why that stuff is important. If you're a partner like FedEx or Napa or Toyota, you name the brand, you like to give us money to run the education foundation, but you like to see some return on that investment. And what they're looking for is, are we providing them with viable student candidates to go into internships and to go to work for those companies. If you don't put your student rosters together, we can't see what your productivity looks like. And if there's no student rosters, it looks like you're not doing anything. And it looks that way not only for us, but it looks that way to our partners, and that's the last thing we want our partners to be thinking. Same thing applies with your employer list. When you have an employer list and a student roster and you're putting people to work for a Firestone store, or you're putting people to work for a GM store, the GM guys like to know that I'm getting students out of this school and they're coming to a GM dealership. When you don't take the time to do that sort of stuff, it just looks bad on you, it looks bad on your program, and it looks bad on the ASE Education Foundation. We really, really, really genuinely need your help here.
I honestly, I didn't even put that together. I spaced it off doing it. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I haven't done it. But how do those folks access that data?
We have reports that show that information, and we share those reports with our partners. And we also, our scorecard is how many people have we placed in the industry, whether it's by way of an internship, by way of getting placed in a regular workplace, or they go on to post-secondary education. We just need to know where these students are coming out of the schools and where they're going. And it's also part of one of your standards as far as surveying your students as to where they're going before they leave and after they leave you. So it's important for you to get student information like their contact information, emails, phone numbers, cell numbers, and so forth, so you can continue to track some of your students and perhaps maybe even attract one or two to your advisory committee.
Yeah.
Now,
So-
John, real quick, as far as, oh man, I just totally blanked about what I had to say.
Well,
CRS.
Any other projects going on in your head there?
yeah. Joe, as you're thinking about that, you just brought up a good point about the exit survey. It's not a big deal to push it out to the students, but I'm used to being in school to do that. I never even thought about that exit survey now that
Yeah.
I'm going to have to change how I do it. So, yeah, that's
Well, you
interesting.
can do it in the form of a Zoom meeting or a Google meeting with your students. There's lots of ways, and you can
There is.
share
It's
that.
just one of those things that you're not even thinking of, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, now I remember what I was going to ask here. Is there a way for you guys to track? So, like, a lot of my students, they don't really go necessarily right out in the industry. They go from my high school to one of the local community colleges or to like Southern or something like that.
Yeah.
Is there a way that gets tracked? So, like, if I have it in my system on the portal, that like I can assign them, or does that get tracked kind of automatically so you can see them coming through the lines of different programs they've been through?
Well, let's see how I might answer that. Once you lose touch with them and they're out of your portal and out of your system, we lose them unless they show up in another place that's accredited.
So something that we started doing, and maybe this is of interest to the rest of you all, we have gone to what we're calling a badging system, and I've developed badges for all the ASE tests, for student level tests. We use SP2. I've got badging for that. So we use Canvas as our LMS setup, and our college uses that as well. So what I'm doing with the badging piece is it's like a briefcase, a digital briefcase that they can take with them. And if they've passed that student ASE, they can carry that on to the college with them. Plus, it's also available for employers, because a lot of our employers are wanting to use more of a badging criteria. Is that something that would be of interest at all that you could do? It'd probably be easier to show you sometime after this how that all works, but that's something that our employers like to see, because it lists out all those tests that they've taken, dates that they're good through, etc.
So it's like a portfolio that they carry with them.
That's exactly what it is, and it lives in Canvas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's actually from a, we built it in Portfolium is the name of it. It's a plugin in Canvas, and it gives a breakdown of what the test is that they're taking, and the date that it's good, what the test actually means. And those of us out here like SP2, I'm sure most of us are familiar with that, as they take the safety sections, that lives in there also, because that's got a date stamp on it of being valid.
Yep. That's pretty cool. That's really cool.
Anybody else got any questions, concerns?
There was something that came up on the chat, and somebody was asking about a list of the, I guess, the field managers. John, I don't know if there's a way to pop it up on your screen or anybody's screen, and
Let me. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you open up sharing for
I
me?
just turned it on.
Okay, here it comes. This is our field manager map.
Yep.
This is on the ASE Education Foundation website, and below is all the contact information for individual field managers by state.
Yep. Thank you, John. Yeah, I think somebody from Utah is on, and I think I saw it pop up in the chat there for a minute. So some of the things that we've discussed, standard 1.1B is a survey that you survey the graduates. Actually, it's asking the administration to do it. Survey the students right before they leave to find out, are they continuing on in related education? Are they going directly into industry, or are they just going somewhere else? Boom. That's something that should be done annually. Standard 5.4 talks about graduate survey. Graduate survey means after they leave. And the importance of a graduate survey is to gather information after they leave, whether they're in post-secondary or in industry, of what was relevant in the program related to tools and equipment, curriculum, and facilities, and get feedback. And the reason that's important, and it's supposed to be discussed in the advisory committee in standard 6.3, the reason it's important is that's your customer. And if your customers are collectively saying that there was something lacking in the program, and it's because you didn't have that piece of equipment or that training aid or that resource, that's the validation you need for your administration to say, here's what our customer are saying, and our employers are having to retrain or whatever. Standard 714 is a student survey. That is a survey that is done annually by current students to receive feedback. One of the things that we're finding is a lot of the students that are in your class that really want to be there, one of the questions is, what could you change? And those students are saying, how do we get rid of the students that don't want to be here? And when you summarize those surveys and that little piece comes up, that gets industry's attention. And then industry is going to ask your administration, what do you mean there's people in your program that don't want to be here? And then it puts a little bit of pressure on them to explain why those seats are just filled with butts and potentially not students that really want to be there. So the accreditation process puts all of these pieces and checks and balances in place. Unfortunately, I don't think we as ASE or NATEF did a good enough job explaining those values to you, your administration, or your advisory committee, and how to utilize the accreditation for what it's designed for. It's designed for program improvement and not just paperwork. It's not about paperwork. It's about program improvement. And that's what we are trying to do right now, is create that library of resources for the field managers, for everybody, so that you have the ammunition and you have the information you need. And if we're asking you to do something, you know why we're asking and that there's value to it, and not just because somebody decided you needed to do that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I can attest to that. So what we normally do is, and I'm sure that many of you may use it, we use Google Classroom. And so at the end of the year, students receive a Google form that basically has their survey, and it outlines exactly that. Those questions have come right from the ASE. I've just taken those questions and allowed them to answer it, and it becomes a powerful tool. We've done over the years, when I first started at the school, we had these little, look like fish tackle boxes for hand tools, which, it was kind of archaic. And so we started going with rollaways. How did we get there? It was the students that basically said, hey, listen, we don't have enough hand tools per student. How can we get more out there? So we went with rollaways, started with 5, 10, we're up to 25 rollaways that they can roll around the shop. It was simple. Students had filled out the end of the year, survey, and this is what they said. I compacted that information, took it to my administrator and say, it's not me, it's right here from the students. This is what they're looking to get. Can we do it? I got absolutely no pushback. And it happened. And so it works. It's a powerful tool. Students' voices are powerful tools, and it works. Same thing with end of the year. Seniors leaving, I have the same survey set up so that in May, just before their final exam, they would take an end of the year, fill out the end of the year form. I would, if they're willing, they'd give you the cell phone number. But again, I know that many of the students will use school emails.
Yeah, because this is called.
Some of the students use their school emails. Well, we all know that once our students graduate, they no longer look at those emails. So I'm looking to get that email that they use on a personal level. This way, in our system, the state requires us to do a 90-day follow-up, which is, coincides with the ASE standard. So again, 90 days out, I can contact that student, see where they're at, if they're employed, post-secondary, in the military, and I have that feedback in a database that I can go back to my administrator and report that out, but also in 5 years have ASE look at that, and it takes care of that standard as well. So that's the way it works for us. It's worked for over 7 years now, and I have this large database of what students' needs, what they liked about the program, what they didn't like about the program, and we've made changes from e-learning to the way we delegate tools to the way we hand out work and shop. It's just stuff like that. So it's an extremely powerful tool. It really is.
That's what
It's
accreditation
so
is
much
all
more
about.
powerful
Right
when it's coming from students or it's coming from your advisory committee than it is coming from you. So much more powerful.
Absolutely.
That's one of the themes of tonight's discussion is the power of your advisory committee and the power of your surveys. That's all part of the checks and balances that George was referring to.
Do you all think that what we're going through right now, the way we got thrown into this, do you think with the update that you're all doing on standards and stuff, that the whole e-learning is going to play a larger role in what you're doing for your standard evaluation?
So, interesting question, because e-learning is standard 12 and it's optional, and it's only truly there along with standard 11 for schools that are lacking in program hours. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
if you have all the program hours you need, you don't need standards 11 and 12, but, and that's e-learning outside of the classroom. Now, many of you were already using e-learning during the school year before you were removed from the classroom. Now you're just modifying that behavior some with the distance learning. The only way that it would make a difference for ASE is if somebody decided that they were going to or needed to add upwards of maximum of 25% of their current hours. They could allocate to a combination of standards 11 and 12, or 11 by itself, or 12 by itself in e-learning outside of the classroom. And that's sort of what you're doing right now. So if you wanted to extend this training model that you're currently doing to assign more stuff outside of the classroom and use more of your classroom time for hands-on, and you wanted to increase your program hours if needed, you would use standard 12. If you don't need the program hours, you just continue to do what you're currently doing, or modify your program next year to incorporate that, but not change your level of accreditation or what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I feel like that's one thing administration is going to question us on a lot more. College syllabi, things like that. We've already been told that we're going to be writing things up differently. Again, we're never going back to how it was before. In the syllabi, we have to have a written preparation from here on out for this kind of thing to happen. And I just didn't know if in your all's world, if you're going to write it up to say something like this, if it does happen again, there could potentially be this is what we'll do if there can't be the hands-on piece.
And I think we're going to address that, and I'll ask John to chime in, but I think we're going to address that by the situation. You know what I mean? We understand what schools are capable of and not capable of now. We understand that you've got bigger things to worry about now than ASE accreditation, and we don't want you worrying about us holding you accountable for something that you can't do, that's above and beyond your resources. So we're going to address those things as they show up. At the same time, though, knowing that you have a list of tasks that the students have to perform hands-on competencies on, that gives you some I think, leverage and muscle with your administration to say, yeah, we can do this, but we still can't go away from this. This is the core of our program, and these are the components that we are measured on long-term. And when you get into the standard 7.5A, which is the tasks and the P1s, 2s, and 3s, and the job sheets and the progress chart, that's a go, no go item. You can take that to your administration and say, this part of the accreditation is non-negotiable. Yes, we have to have our e-learning or our theory, but we cannot deviate away from the hands-on activities of our students in order to stay accredited, but more importantly, make sure that the students are ready for the next level of education or to enter the workplace or even an internship. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep. And maybe those conversations need to come from us, and maybe it's in some of the webinars that we're talking about. Conversations and gatherings like this for us help us understand what we may need to do to help you all in the field. And by sitting here just tonight, we could create a webinar or a short video that could come literally from the president of our foundation or whoever, that really drills down to what you're going to be held accountable for in accreditation in a normal process, and what value that brings to your two customers. the students and the people that hire them. And by doing that, now you've got it from us as the accrediting body, and maybe even some of our foundation partners, some of our stronger recognized foundation partners, which can support those decisions for people to hear, if that provides value.
I think that would be a very strong presentation for you all to do something like that and include some of those heavy hitters in it.
Yep.
That would mean a lot more than well, I mean, hearing from somebody that's high up on that chain and in the ASE chain means more, I think. Well, it just mean a lot to the heavy hitters in my district.
Right. And if we have a senior member of Toyota or General Motors or Napa or FedEx or UPS that could do a short blip and tie it all together, that would be pretty powerful for everybody to hear, correct?
I think that would be that would be great.
Yep. All right. So I'll add that to my bucket list. How's that?
Just one more thing to do.
Yeah, that's all right. I'm
Pawn
good.
it off on Robin.
Yeah. Cool. What else can we do to help you folks?
Man, right now I'm just soaking in all the information. You know, some of the stuff you've talked about is helped clear up some things. It's nice to see you guys working on like kind of clarifying the standards and like having some example stuff available and things like that. I know almost 10 years ago now, no, 8 years ago now, when I started doing this whole process, I know it seemed like I was kind of in the dark, and I had some people that around me that were accredited to help me out tremendously, you know, but having some more examples out there and things like that, I think will be real good for a lot of people.
So one of the things I just did for the field managers on Monday, I have samples that I used in the past on schools I worked with. I have a sample employer survey, student survey, graduate survey, facility evaluation, and sample agenda for your both advisory committee meetings each year that cover all of the standards that ASE requires input from the advisory committee. And Donna or Robin can share those with you guys and with anybody. And they're in Word documents, so you can modify them any way that you want, but at least there's some sort of resources to give you something to work from instead of trying to create something from scratch. How's that?
Good.
Yeah.
Would that be something you could maybe email to me, and I can put that up on our page here so people have access to that?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. You know, just having any extra resources available is really going to help more people, you know, navigate through some of the stuff. And now with more people being accredited, it's nice, you know, people reach out and you can, you know, give them a hand on, you know, hey, this is how you do this, this is how you do that.
Right.
Have you all seen a big boom in schools getting accredited in the last 5-10 years?
It's interesting. It fluctuates up and down, and different states are moving in different directions. Example, here in Texas, there wasn't, it's not mandated, it's not anything, but all of a sudden there's been this major push over the last couple years. Some states that mandate it, it's a yay or nay. We're seeing growth on the auto and the truck side. We're seeing a decline on the collision side. And sadly, those programs are disappearing. And it's kind of because a lot of collision instructors tell their administration, we have ICAR, we don't need ASE. And ICAR is just a curriculum. ASE is a program accreditation. And because they haven't had industry involvement in their program in the past, it's real easy for those programs to disappear. And, you know, I tell people, I said, if industry doesn't know you're there, they're never going to know you're gone. You know what I mean? And
they're very difficult to bring back.
It's very difficult to bring back. But if we know of a program that's struggling and we know early enough, we can try to help provide the local industry support to try to help that school district or that college to change their decision on keeping that program. And that has happened across the country before. We're seeing a growth in new medium heavy duty truck programs, especially at the high school level. We're seeing some growth in automotive programs in some places. In some places, we're seeing a decline. But once again, it goes back to the advisory committee. If industry doesn't know you're there, they're not going to know you're gone. And there's not an administrator in the country that's going to close a program where industry is actively involved, because they're the taxpayer. But if they're not actively involved, industry, then it's easy to sweep it under the carpet and bring in a dance class. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
George, I have a story I'd like to share with the group about just what you just described. I was talking to a businessman who was looking for technicians. That's the reason I got a call. And he wanted to know if there were any accredited schools in his area. So we have a search function on the website. And I did a search, a 50-mile radius from his place of business. And I found 3 schools, none of which were, quote, in town, but they were within 50 miles of his place of business. And after we did that search, I asked him, I said, do you have any high schools in town? He said, yeah, there's about 6 high schools in town. I said, does any of them have an automotive program? He said, you know, I never thought about that. I said, well, maybe what you ought to do is call the school and ask the principal or talk to somebody that answers the phone and ask if they have an automotive program. And if you find 2 or 3 of them, why don't you make an appointment to go visit with the instructor? And he said, you know, I never thought of that. Maybe I ought to go find out how many automotive programs are in town that I don't even know about. And sure enough, he called me about 2 months later and said, I found 2 programs in my town that have automotive programs. They're not accredited, and we're talking to them about that. So that's how some of this stuff kind of starts. So some of the business community needs to realize that they do have those resources in town. They just never thought about going to find out or talk to them.
Yep.
And it's
Happens
so
a
often
lot.
that many programs are running, and they're running, you know, behind the curtain, and none of the business people ever get to see or talk to them.
John, it's interesting. Years back, I was asked to go help a school in Anchorage, Alaska. And of course, a guy from Texas doesn't want to go to Anchorage, Alaska in the middle of winter, but guess when George went? Middle of winter. But the principal over Christmas break invited business and industry to come to an open house in January. And the principal called me and said, George, you were never so right. He said, 2/3 of the people that showed up to our career center didn't even know the building existed and had been there since 1975. So once again, business and industry sometimes may drive by your school and not know that that program's there. And that's where we can come in. That's where our partners locally, they're foundation partners for a reason. One, they want to support ASE, but they need entry-level employees, and they want to find that pool that's closest to home. And many of you on this call, you're that close to home for that.
So George, is that something we can reach out to our field people about to get in touch with those other companies?
Yep.
Okay. Don, I'll have to
Okay.
get in touch with you, and we can go from there on that stuff.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, everybody, I'm going to have to get off of here. I got a day starting pretty early tomorrow. I appreciate so much you all coming on. Great information. And thank you. And Joel, thank you for building this database up and getting it all handled.
No
Joel,
problem.
I have to run too, but I
Yeah.
want to share a screen with your guys.
Okay.
I want to refer everyone to the ASE Education Foundation website. I'm sure you're already all familiar with it. But when when you go to the ASE Education Foundation website, the landing page looks like this. And there's this coronavirus update right dead center of the landing page. Presumably everyone can see that now.
Yep.
Yep.
And if you want to know who your field manager is, there's a button up here that says Find a Rep. You see that button up there? And when you click on Find a Rep, that's how you get to that map and that contact list. So we're real easy to find. We're not hiding in the corner, and we're out here to help you guys answer questions, help you with advisory committee meetings, advice, coaching, and so forth. We're here to help.
Thanks for inviting us. Yep.
We appreciate it.
I think this is good. This is about how long we normally go anyway, so it's probably a good stopping point here. I just want to say thank you very much to everyone from ASE for showing up tonight to this. I really truly appreciate it, and I know it's been good for everyone to hear from you guys and clarify. And I've learned a bunch of stuff that I'm going to be able to implement now from here too. So those of you that are on here, I know last week we talked about some people wanted to talk with John Gardner and stuff like that. I reached out to him, and he'll come on next week with us to talk with us and just kind of go over stuff, his stuff and things like that. So that'll be next week's meeting. But if anyone has any other questions, go ahead. If not, we can always reach out to the people from your field rep, and they can help you out from there, I guess.
Call us. We want to hear from you. We're here. We're here for you.
We're not going anywhere.
Right.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Cool.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, guys.